Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Hogue Microswitch A01 California legal version. First off, though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank Hogue for sending these guys, well, this guy, as well as a couple of other guys along. Said, hey Nick, any of our product you're interested in? I said, yeah, absolutely. I picked this guy up because I live in the California, and I'm always curious to see different options that are available for us here. But as always, I told him I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They did still send it along. Nonetheless, we have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. We're going to see that this guy is not particularly large. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica, and what we're going to see is that although the handle actually isn't far off of the Delica in size, the sharpened blade length is markedly smaller. Here it is against a Spyderco PM2, in this case the River's Edge cutlery version, because my other PM2 is wearing a fancy set of pants I'm testing at the moment. So there is that. Again, this is not a big knife, and here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. Yeah, not a particularly large knife. And actually, I want to throw it up there against a couple of other relevant areas for size comparison. First off, a ruler. And we're going to see that there is just no way that a police officer is going to, no matter how much they dislike you, is going to be able to measure this as being greater than 2 inches, which is relevant here in the California. Actually, I want to put it up against another couple of California legal autos. Here it is against the ProTech Runt, which is, I think, going to be the main competitor from ProTech, which is another side-fire automatic. And then here it is against the Hogue Knives Micro Incursion, well, HK and Hogue, which is a out-the-front automatic, so it's coming out the front. Did I really just say that? But it's also a 2-inch automatic, and it's also a nice little choice there. So there we go. Next thing I want to comment on is there are a bunch of Microswitch A01s. Looking at the various websites, there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of differentiation. So this very specifically is the drop point 1.95-inch blade A01 Microswitch guy. This is designed to be California legal because in California we have a law that says, oh my God, automatic knives are scary murder weapons unless they're under 2 inches. It doesn't make sense, but it doesn't have to. And then finally, one quick note. This is not a strap cutter. In the back here, it looks like it's going to be a strap cutter, like you're going to be able to go in there and cut up the seatbelt. Nope. That's a pocket clip. This is a cap lifter for taking the top off of a bottle of ginger beer or whatever you prefer. So there is that. Let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting, weird little knife. So on the good side, start with, this is made in the States. Now, of course, quality is about effort rather than geography, but nonetheless, it always brings me joy to see things being made a little bit more locally to me, as I'm sure you feel for your home country. So for many people, that's going to be a positive thing, and for me, I think it is too. So, made in the States, that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, disassembly was actually very straightforward on this guy, and it's actually allowed. This is something that Hogue actually changed during the time of my working around the company, so to speak, in that they are now, they're saying properly that aftermarket disassembly is at your own risk. If you screw it up when you're disassembling it, that's on you, but otherwise it doesn't affect the warranty. That is a beautiful thing, and I keep bringing it up because it is a wonderful thing when you see a company say, customers aren't liking that provision. Why don't we go ahead and change that? That is a sign of, well, frankly, just giving a damn that I like to see. They won my respect big time there by putting into giving us a much better policy than they had before. So that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, the safety on this guy. This does have a safety. This little switch here, if you watch disassembly, you'll see exactly how it works. But there's a little switch that kind of puts a fork around the button, meaning that you cannot, well, this is engaged, press the button down. Nothing will happen. I can press as hard as I would like on this, and it's just not going to disengage. But I pull that back, now it works. And similarly, when the knife is open, if I click the safety in place, there is nothing I can do to close this blade. If I'm holding the button down, I get a little bit of blade play, but that's because I've partially disengaged the butt lock. But again, pull that back. Now I can unlock the knife. So it has a safety. Those are generally not needed in my estimation if the button is designed properly and whatnot, but it is nice to have it there, and for some people that may feel, well, safe. So that is something to keep in mind. Next thing, ergos. So, ergos are better than they look, and that's not like damning by faint praise. I'm actually pretty impressed by the ergonomics on this, given the amount of stuff that's going on. You take one look at this, and it feels like it should have the ergonomics of a bag of angry cobras, but in reality, it works pretty well, right? You've got a fair amount of jimping on the top here, which you'll definitely feel against your finger, but it also keeps you from even possibly moving. This finger groove works well. The clip is actually really well positioned, such that in my relatively small hands, this feels pretty good. And so I gotta say, at first I was thinking, just looking at this in the catalog, like, oh God, my hand is already sad about this, but actually it works. The ergos work out well. So, and the balance actually is weirdly okay. And this is, by the way, I think why the backspacer is made of a plastic, right? Because it keeps the balance right where you want it to be. And that's not nothing. So I have to respect very much the fact that you can make a knife that looks this damn weird and still feels acceptable in the hand. That's a great thing. Speaking of the backspacer, I do like having a backspacer there. Both a full backspacer is, I think, a nice thing. It's a neat luxury, not found in the market these days, and I also like the perforation on it. Not only does that allow, like, water and whatnot to get through there, although, again, why are you, paddling your boat with your tiny pocket knife? I don't freaking know, but nonetheless, actually, it'd make it a worse paddle. Moving on. I do like the looks of it, though. It's speed holes. There you go. Now I'm faster if I'm carrying this. I've reduced my drag and increased my speed. So there you go. That's a beautiful thing. Next thing, this is more or less ambidextrous, kind of. What I mean by that is I'm not a lefty. In fact, I have been left behind when it comes to left-hand skills, but what I can very easily do is open this guy with my left hand. I can use the index finger to disengage the safety and to press that button just as readily as I can with my right hand. That's not a particular problem. It may be a little bit more designed for a righty, but it may also be that my right hand is just better at life. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Lefties, I don't think you're left behind on this one, particularly given that you've got the clip. By the way, left behind, but you've got the clip over here in a good position there. So you can swap the clip over too. Next thing, this has a nice blade. The blade on here has a nice little swedge on there, which looks good. It is relatively thin down here at the base. It is CPM 154 steel, which is a steel that I honestly think is a little bit underrated in the community. It strops to a just deliciously sharp edge. It sharpens relatively easy. It keeps that edge for a while. I like 154. I'm sorry, CPM 154. 154 CM, the non-powder version, is a little bit budget, but whatever. Hey, this is a fine choice here. It's got a nice sharpening choil, and the edge on it is actually quite nice. Hogue is a company that does a really nice job with factory edges, generally speaking. And so that's nice. Next thing, price on this guy, $130. Now, that's not cheap, certainly, but for an American-made automatic knife, that's not bad at all. And it's got a relatively smaller target market with the Cali-Legal tiny little size here, so they probably could have stuck it to us more, but I appreciate that they didn't. $130 for this doesn't strike me as bad. Then finally, on the good side, the action here is very nice. It's very snappy, it's reliable, it's not too aggro to close. It doesn't like, no, I mean, you can close this guy without a whole lot of difficulty in there, and it can actually be opened subtly, right? If you're in the lunchroom and Irma from accounting is sitting over there looking for a reason to report you to HR, you can just kind of grab it and open it like that, and now it just looks like Grandpappy's weirdest slip joint possibly ever. Anyways, I digress. The action on it is very nice. So to me, at least, all that's the good is that the action is nice, price is good, blade is good, more or less ambi, the backspace is nice, the ergos are much better than they look, the safety is nice to have, disassembly was straightforward, and Hogue has really done a great job revising that policy, and it is made in the States. On the great side to me, this is a Cali-Legal option, right? It's a dumb law. I fully, admit this, right? But it's very nice to have options for folks like us who are dealing with those kinds of dumb laws. And this gives you an option, especially for folks with a very tactical aesthetic, right? This is a knife that feels very tactical, even though it is very tiny, right? But it's also relatively low threat. There are going to be people who do not live in California, but, deal with coworkers who would be afraid of anything greater than 2 inches or something like that. Who the heck knows? But I very much appreciate that they've made this as an option for us here in the Cali, and for folks who just want a smaller knife for wherever the heck they live in the world. So to me, that's what's great, is that we have this option. Bad side. This is a very short blade, right? 2 inches it's not ideal for everyday carry. You're not going to be cutting a birthday cake. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's bearable. But it's still pretty damn short. But it's also relatively thick at the tip. If we look at this right here, we see this comes up to a relatively thick edge. There is just not all that much distal taper on this edge, and so as a result, if you're looking for something with a super thin and slicey tip, you might go a little bit elsewhere. Next thing, it is an automatic knife, and so autos are always going to have legal questions, right? Different places around the U.S., and I imagine around the world, have laws that specifically target these kinds of knives. I am not a lawyer. Talk to a lawyer rather than a jackass on the internet, but at any given moment, you may be committing a felony by carrying this, depending on what city, state, and municipality you happen to be in. Next thing, the design on this guy is polarizing. I'll be honest with you, this is not my particular style. This is not a knife that I look at and it makes my heart sing. It is very high speed, it is very low drag, and it is going to, I think, suit a very strong population in the knife world, but that population ain't me. Entertainingly, though, it actually is my wife. I showed this to my wife, expecting her to bust out laughing. She said, "Ooh, I like that. That's cute." Thus, again, proving that my wife is both higher speed and lower drag than I am. But nonetheless, this is going to be polarizing. I don't care for the aesthetic. Other people clearly do, and you may be living with one and you don't even know it. So there is that. Next thing, the button on this guy. What you're going to see on a lot of automatic knives with a side fire, button lock basically, is that the button is usually flush to the handle right here, meaning that I can press this guy down against the table and nothing happens. With this guy, though, the button is actually sticking up above there, and what that means is that although if I press this down into a table, I haven't gotten it to basically to disengage. And given I haven't set it down on something specifically, but what it does do is if you accidentally press that down, you can see that the tip has now come out into play, right? I've disengaged the button lock a little tiny bit. And so actually having that safety turns out to be very useful, right? Because even if I do that, with the safety in place, it doesn't move quite as much. It is stopped there. And so having that safety is in a lot of ways overcoming the fact that this button is a little bit proud, but I'd kind of like to see that button recessed down a little bit. I feel like that would make this, well, it'd make the safety unnecessary, and that would be a nice thing for me, because the safety is just another step, and it is also a fine motor thing. One of the advantages of automatic knives is they can be useful for people with maybe one arm, or also just accessibility things. You don't want to get in there and do fine motor stuff with a thumb stud or flipper tab, and a safety disengaging, well, that's fine motor stuff. And so do keep that in mind. Next thing, this guy does have the clip here. Clip is fine, but it is in the cap lifter area. I was able to open several different beverages with this guy without a whole lot of difficulty, but it definitely looks a little bit strange. And although I can see why they hung the clip in the way they do, this will hang in the pocket kind of off to the back, which is a nice thing. I don't love the fact that it's crossing through that area, and I can definitely see certain kinds of opening tasks where that would actually interfere or anything like that. So keep that up. And the other thing, keep that up. No, keep that in mind is what I meant to say. And the other thing is that the clip is on top of this texturing area. So this is a little bit more difficult to get into and out of the pocket, because every time the seam of your pocket is going to be coming across these four little areas here. So that is something that's going on there. Next thing, speaking of the handle, there's a lot going on here, right? You've got the pivot, which is a little bit proud of the handle. You've got the button, you've got the safety, you've got the screws, which are necessary, but you've got the back screw plate here. You've got these little grooves here. You look at this thing and it's just full of freaking hardware, right? This is a very, very busy back of the knife, and it's not particularly smooth from the side, right? Because a lot of these things are proud of the knife itself, and so there's a lot to kind of catch and rip on here, edges and whatnot, and it has a very specific aesthetic, right? And speaking of the handle, there is a lot of handle for a relatively small blade here. If I put this guy up next to, for instance, the ProTech Runt, what you're going to see is that the Runt is pretty smaller, right? The Runt is a much smaller knife than this guy is. In terms of thickness, the Runt might actually be a little bit, no, at the thickest part of the Hogue, they're about Hogue might be a little thicker, but either way, the handle is definitely smaller on this guy, and even compared to the Hogue HK Micro Incursion, which given is an out-the-front automatic, very different world, but still is a much smaller knife for the same amount of legal blade. And so as a result, you get a lot of handle here. That could actually be a benefit. If you have a lot of hand, you'll have a lot of gription on this guy. This fills my relatively small hands well, but it does mean that you've got a very ridiculous blade-to-handle ratio on this guy. And so if you're looking for something that's small in the pocket, this is not going to be the real choice for you there. Then finally, on the bad side, one thing that I ran into, and this, by the way, I'm sure is something that will go away as you carry it more and more and get more used to it, but a couple of times I tried to take this out of my pocket, and I got the material in my pocket snagged in the cap lifter area here. Because if I kind of try and pull it out the back of my pocket, it's sort of like a reverse Emerson wave, except instead of opening the blade, it just stops the damn knife. And so I had to kind of remind myself, okay, first pull this direction, then lift. So that way I'm not catching the rip. Well, if I cut my pants with it, then rip. But no, I'm not catching the lip of my pocket with the knife itself. So you kind of have to do the rip. And you'll get there, but it's definitely a thing. So that is the downside of having this right here and so close to the pocket clip area. So that to me is the bad here, is that it's a little bit tricky to depocket at first. There's a lot of handle for the blade here. There is a lot going on this handle overall. There is a clip in the cap lifter area. The protruding button is kind of forcing that safety to be there when I don't know that it needs to be. Whatever. The design is polarizing. Autos have legal questions, and it is a very short blade. On the ugly front, there's nothing particularly ugly here. I mean, some people are going to like the aesthetic, some people aren't. But nonetheless, let's go to the final conclusion, which is that this is an interesting little option. I think that really summarizes where this guy lands. This is an option, right? Because it's made in the States. It's easy and very allowed disassembly. Allowed, not loud, unless you scream while disassembling it, in which case I feel like you've got other problems, and this knife won't solve them. But anyways, you've got fine ergos, a nice backspacer, ambi functionality, a nice blade, a nice price, a nice action, and it is legal, even in a place with some really dumb laws. It is very short-bladed, necessarily. There are legal constraints with any automatic, no matter the blade size. It has a safety that is necessary here, but might not have been, generally speaking. The clip is up in the cap lifter area. It's got a very busy handle, which is also pretty out of proportion to the blade. And the see, I don't even think about the safety. And the cap lifter, the cap lifter can also lift your pocket if you are not careful. It can capture your pocket. Ultimately, though, I feel like this knife is all about being an option. Right? And it is an option. It is a relatively unique one, right? The world of Cali-Legal automatic knives is not large, right? You got like ProTech, you got the Hogue Micro, you got a few other options out there, but it's not particularly huge. And this provides something that is a very unique design, right? This is an Leishowitz design, and it's going to resonate with some people, and it's going to be something that I think is going to work well for a number of folks, right? It is a good functional tool, and it works very well dealing with dumb laws or scared coworkers or a little bit of each, right? And it is very different from the rest of the field. It feels much higher speed and lower drag, and both aesthetically and ergonomically it is different. Having a large amount of handle on here, and given you've got like the ProTech half-breed, which gives you a short blade, long handle approach, but still, this is going to give you something that is very, very aesthetically different. And it does it at a price point, I think, that makes it an option. Right? It makes this a knife where it's just like, yeah, this could work. This could be a very solid boy. So this is all about the options, ultimately. And this is going to, as a result, end up being one of those reviews where I tell you that you already know if you're interested in this knife, right? Because if you don't love the look or you don't love the size of it, then honestly, nothing for you. You got other options from Hogue, from ProTech, that I've already reviewed. Things like the Micro Incursion, the ProTech Sprint, the Runt 5, any of those kinds of things. They're not far in price from this guy, depending on the model you end up with, but they are very different in style, and that might end up making more sense for you. But if this design is resonating with you, if you're looking at that and going like, yeah, it's kind of awesome, and the size is making sense for your life, then I can absolutely see you wanting to flip on this micro switch. Hogue onto your wallets. This is going to catch your eye. Okay, anyways. Hope this is interesting, that you could bear the puns at the end, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.